Let's bring in Jeremy Au Yong, who's one of the editors at the Straits Times, leading the general election coverage. So, Jeremy, plenty of activity over the weekend with several parties on their first walkabouts. What stood out for you?
Hi, Ali. Well, I would say two things stood out for me. The first is, I guess, on walkabouts is the time where you get to see a little bit, you get some clues about who is standing where and which parties are contesting which wards. And we got to see that this time, especially from the SDP. I thought the SDP really, in its series of walkabouts, and it did more walkabouts this weekend than nearly any other party, really put its cards out there on the table to show who is standing where. I mean, in elections past, opposition sometimes can be quite coy about revealing quite early on where they are contesting or which candidates they're going to field. That was not the case for SDP, especially this past weekend. The party's chief, Dr. Chee Soon Juan, arrived in Bukit Batok with an entourage. Everybody was wearing a t-shirt that said Chee Soon Juan for Bukit Batok. So it was very clear from the get-go he was going to stand there. And they went to do walkabouts in 4 of the 5 constituencies they contested in 2015. And they brought with them a lot of familiar faces, so it made it quite clear who was standing where. So I think in this first week of first weekend of walkabouts actually, we got quite a decent picture of the race that's to come. The second thing that stood out for me really is safe distancing, because this is I've been covering general elections for some time, and this was really some walkabouts unlike I've ever seen before. So much of a walkabout is letting the voter get to see your face. Everybody was wearing masks, so that became not really that much of a factor. You couldn't even really recognize people that much. Also, there was no handshaking. The other big part of a walkabout, people always talk about walkabouts as pressing the flesh. There was none of that. People were waving. The candidates were fist bumping. Sometimes they bumped elbows. So all that was quite different. I would say those were the two things that stood out for me.
Right. Jeremy, on that note of, safe distancing as well, even for the reporters and for the members of the media, it was also difficult for them carrying out the work. Now, we reported that 6 PSP members were booked for breaching safe distancing rules while on a walkabout at Block 358, Bukit Batok Street 31. Any comments on that, Jeremy?
Yeah, well, the NEA has since clarified that a volunteer with them had taken down the details of these 6 PSP members, and the Straits Times reporter who was covering them also had the details taken. But as of yet, nobody has been fined. I think they're looking into it. But I think my takeaway from that really is that this is, as I said earlier, this is a new experience for everyone. It's new to the candidates, it's new to reporters, it's new even to the volunteers and the safe distancing ambassadors. It's not always clear where the line is. And I mean, a walkabout is very much a very social activity. It's about getting to meet people. So I think I see as teething problems that I think everybody will get more used to as the process moves along. This is really, to me, the first instance of this safe distancing walkabout that we had to go through.
Well, another factor that this upcoming general election will see is the increased use of the digital medium. So how have the parties fared in using online platforms and reaching out to voters? And what do you think candidates and parties have to do now to ensure they can attract voters to their e-rallies?
Yeah, so I mean, it's uneven between the parties. Some parties are a little bit ahead of the others. There are 2 aspects to it. I guess the first part is the easier part, which is the tech aspect, working out how to do your live streams or your Zoom conferences or what have you. I think a lot of the parties have been practicing with that, and I think they're really starting to get the hang of it. With some parties that had some hiccups here and there. We've seen the PAP, WP, PSP, SDP all do Zoom conferences and Facebook live streams throughout the circuit breaker period. And we know parties like the SPP and SDA have built their own studios for broadcasts that they want to do, online broadcasts they want to do during the campaign. And so tech-wise, I think that's okay. And even those without equipment, the elections department has said they have set up a venue for people without the required equipment to come and book, and they can use that to do their broadcast. So the tech side, I think most parties will get there. The second part of it, and I think the much harder part, is how do you get people to watch it? I think that's a struggle for everyone. Political content, especially in a video, is not going to be that compelling most of the time. So it's one thing about how to advertise, get the word out so people know that it exists, and then it's something quite different to get them to click on it, tune in, and then to stay tuned while you are talking about it. That's quite hard. We've seen some parties experiment with little fun videos, little memes, some in a TikTok format. I think we'll see more of that coming, but it's just everybody trying out different things. I don't think anybody has really cracked this puzzle yet.
All right. Now, Jeremy, let's talk a bit more about the opposition. The opposition is set to head into the next GE without its traditional powwow, as it were. But SDP said there could be an online meeting. How would you describe the level of collaboration among the opposition parties? Do you expect several three-cornered fights, perhaps?
Yeah, I'm not sure why they have decided not to hold this powwow that they have had really every election that I can remember since dating back to the 90s. I think maybe they skipped one, but it's a little unusual that they chose not to do it this time. We've spoken to experts about this powwow, and they've pointed out that it does serve several key functions. So this powwow, you bring all the opposition members together in one room, you write down all the lists of constituencies on the board, and then they say, okay, I'm standing here, I'm standing there, and then they bargain. Maybe you stand here, and I make way for you here, you make way for me there. There's some bargaining process that goes through in the end to try and avoid three-cornered fights. So they get to know each other and they sort out their constituencies. As a group, not as what they're trying to do now is reach out directly to different parties to negotiate. So as the experts point out, some things are lost when you do it that way. Firstly, is you don't get a third party that can help break some sort of impasse. If both of us want to stand here and I have nothing else to give you, there is no third party who is listening that say, okay, maybe I can give you something else so that you stand down from there. That just doesn't exist when it's a direct one-on-one negotiation. And the other thing is a big meeting can sometimes level the playing field a little bit between a bigger party and a smaller party. In a direct negotiation between a big party and a small party, the small party has very little leverage. And especially if you are a new party, a lot of the negotiations are based on having a particular party or candidate having worked the ground in a particular constituency, and therefore that gives him more claim to run in a certain place. If you are a new party, that also doesn't happen. So all those things complicate the opposition unity this time around, and I won't be surprised if we see more three-cornered fights.
Well, let's focus on the biggest opposition party, the Workers' Party, of course. According to the WP chief Pritam Singh, Mr. Lau Tia Kiang is recovering from his injuries sustained in a fall in April. If Mr. Lau doesn't run in the next GE, Jeremy, how much of a blow would it be for WP?
Wow. Okay, so let's just be clear that we do not know if Mr. Lau is going to run or not. It's entirely possible that he will, but Mr. Lau has been really the cornerstone of the WP for some time. He is their most recognizable face and has been for the longest time their biggest personality. And you can tell the kind of presence he had or influence he had, that when he did suffer that fall, really a lot of people, even from the PAP, from across the different opposition parties, were wishing him well. So when you lose an icon like that, really any party would feel the loss, and I'm sure WP would. At the same time, over the past few years, Mr. Lau has been planning his succession, has been planning how to transition away so that leadership is passed on. So since the last election, he has stepped down as Secretary General of the Workers' Party and handed the reins over to Mr. Pritam Singh. And you can see Mr. Pritam Singh since then really starting to step forward and be more the face of the WP. So they were, even before his fall, Mr. Lau was preparing for a life, preparing his party for life after he steps down. So I think that would help temper a little bit the effect of Mr. Lau. If he chooses not to run, I think that will help temper that effect a little bit.
Right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Jeremy. We've been speaking to foreign editor for the Straits Times, Jeremy Au Yong, who's part of the GE coverage team here at the Straits Times.